Good morning. This is inDialog. I am Vidhya. Join me today as I talk to Bharati Mukherjee, the author of Acclaim. Born in Calcutta, Bharati Mukherjee is the author of several works of fiction such as The Tiger's Daughter, Wife, and Jasmine. She has received the National Book Critics Circle Award for her collection of short stories, The Middleman and Other Stories. She is currently a distinguished professor of English at the University of California, Berkeley. Welcome to inDialog, Bharati.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be talking to you, Vidya.
It's wonderful to be talking to you too. How and when did you decide to become a writer?
I'm a person of very quick, overly quick decisions, so I knew when I was 3 years old, living in a joint family with 45 other family members in Calcutta, that I was going to be a writer.
At 3, that's
Yes.
pretty early. Oh, so did you know to read and write that early?
Yes, I was precocious. We have in Bengal a ceremony called Hate Khuri, which is initiation into literacy. And you're not supposed to learn how to read and write your name prior to that Hate Khuri ceremony, which is done in front of goddess Saraswati, who is my name. Bharati is a version of that. But my mother sort of jumped the gun or jumped the pen and taught me to read and write very early.
So what were your impressions when you first set foot on American soil?
I came, to Iowa rather than to New York or California, and I had absolutely no preparation, no orientation about what the United States was like, except through MGM musicals, which every Wednesday afternoon, we went to Wednesday matinee at the Metro Cinema in Calcutta. So I didn't know that there were small towns, that there was a rural United States.
Right.
And I'd never seen sort of cows in healthy settings. The cows that I was familiar with were on the streets of Calcutta. And once, one of my early traumatic childhood experiences was right in front of our family house. There were tram tracks, and a stray cow was sliced in half run over by a tram. So I was used to urban cows and could deal with that, but not healthy cows in green pastures.
So was the assimilation process an easy one for you?
Well, I came as a foreign student with the notion that at the end of 2 years I was going back to Calcutta to marry the man that my father would have picked out for me. So it was not a question of assimilation or how will I make my home here, but simply getting on. And for the first time, it was very exhilarating because it was the first time I actually left home and didn't have to be the goody-goody person that I was because I was an obedient, docile kind of daughter. And so just being in a women's dorm, in those days there were segregated dorms in Iowa, being in a women's dorm with women from other Asian countries my age and doing things like going to the movies by ourselves or going for coffee together. It was a very big deal. Or talking about our feelings. All that was a very big deal.
But you didn't marry the man that your father chose. Describe the day that you got married to Clark Blaze to us.
It was I met Clark on his first night, very snowy night. He just hitchhiked in from Cambridge, Massachusetts to Iowa to come to the program. And the director of the program, Paul Engel, had invited just me, I guess to show off that we have international students, to his house to impress Clark. And then he says he was very attracted, but it took him many months to drum up the courage to ask me out. And some of it was that there were rumors, I don't know why or how, that my father had sent bodyguards who would break the knees of any young man who dared to ask me out, which was not at all true. But I'd never dated, and I probably would have had a hard time. Anyway, we we went out for 2 weeks, and at the end of that, we got married during a lunch break.
Wow.
And that was that.
You lived in Canada for about 14 years, and your opinion was that Canada was hostile to immigrants. Did you have any personal experiences that made you feel that way?
Yes, I have had my personal experience of being spat on, of being called Packy, of being sent to the back of a voyageur, meaning like Greyhound-like bus, being thrown out of hotel lobbies and not served in stores. I mean, it was like what...
That's pretty hostile.
Not only hostile, but a kind of what really, really hurt me was that the intellectuals in Canada and the government, Liberal Party government, did not come to the rescue of did not even acknowledge this kind of racism that was going on. Their easy answer consistently in the 70s was all that racism happens in the U.S., not in Canada.
Is that why you decided to move?
Yes, I mean, I was really very, very tormented, and I knew I wouldn't emotionally survive if I stayed in that distressing situation.
Would you read us a passage from your novel which is pertaining to the mixed race topic that we've just been talking about?
Yes, I'd like to read a very short passage from Leave It to Me, because the protagonist is someone who is part Indian, part Fresno, Californian, part Vietnamese, and it's the character came to me from, or the idea for the novel, let's say, came to me from court case of a serial killer that I had attended briefly in Delhi. All right. For all official purposes, like Social Security cards and unemployment benefits, I am, or was, Debbie D. Martino, a fun-loving 23-year-old American girl. I was adopted into a decent Italian-American family in the Hudson Valley. That's the upside of adoption. And believe me, I've approached this situation, my situation, from every angle. The downside is knowing that the other two I owe my short life to were lousy people who'd considered me lousier still and who'd left me to be sniffed at by wild dogs like a carcass in the mangy shade. The upside and the downside of being recyclable trash don't quite balance. Debbie DiMartino is a lie. Whoever my parents intended for me to be never existed. That unclaimable part of myself is what intrigues me. the part that came to life in a desert village and had the name Baby Clearwater Iris Daughter until it was christened in a Catholic orphanage. That's the part I want to remember. But there's another part I try to keep secret, the part that sings to moons and dances with stars. With everything I've done, I've tried to find a balance. It's just that Debbie DiMartino has no weight, no substance. I had to toss her out. And to me, American means tossing out what you don't want from your past and inventing or discovering and amalgamating what you want out of fantasy, history, need, and so on.
So how do you describe yourself in terms of ethno-nationality?
An American of Bengali origin. And I say Bengali because I think original language shapes one in some ways. And the first 8 years of my life, I really didn't even hear English.
Switching subjects, when you start a work of fiction, do you know the personality of the main character before you write the book? For example, Jasmine.
I think I know, and then I realize draft by draft that it's quite often a very different person with a personality of her own, and that I have to become that character so totally that I am simply following the dictates of that character. Jasmine, for example, the novel, ended in ways that I hadn't expected it to end at all.
Is that right?
Yes. I thought she was going to be a caregiver and stay with the disabled person in the wheelchair, older white German Lutheran banker in the Midwest who needed her so desperately. But she upped and went and followed a lover, though I think that she won't stay with the lover forever, that she was going to California. And I realized that every single novel is in some ways my fictional version of where emotionally I was or what crisis was obsessive to me for working out.
So you do identify very strongly with your characters.
Yes, yes, even though they're very different in their responses. And Debbie DiMartino, Debbie, is a serial killer, and I'm not. I've never killed anyone.
I have read that you have a love of Mughal paintings, and that this passion has translated into your writing. Can you describe how?
I've learned how to write in some ways, or discovered my aesthetic strategy from constantly, like poring over catalogs of Mughal paintings, where you have a border containing, levels and levels of stories, whole scenes, especially the early Mughal painting, the Akbar period. And we hang out at auction houses and galleries as much as museums, as much as possible. It's that inclusion of many perspectives rather than a fundamentalist, this is important and that is minor, that lack of making a decision about this is important and that's not, about Mughal paintings that I love. It used to be thought of by colonial English in the 18th century as primitive art because it lacked perspective in the Western way. And I think now art critics are beginning to realize that it's a very different way of storytelling.
So are there any other writers of Indian origin who write in English whose work you admire or like?
Yes, there's so many. Jhumpa Lahiri and Amitav Ghosh and Vikram Chandra. There the whole host. And I like in England the Buddha of Suburbia, Hanif Qureshi.
Mm-hmm. Why is the immigrant experience the topic of choice for many authors like yourself? Very often we read about different kinds of experiences, but the underlying theme seems to be about the immigrant experience.
That most writers write out of personal obsession.
Mm-hmm.
And you find, or I try to find metaphors for my personal obsession.
What do you like most about writing?
I live through writing and reading.
Mm-hmm.
It's, I would die if I didn't think of myself as a writer and write whenever I can. There's not a moment when I'm not at least thinking of fiction. Everything else is like a day job.
How do you think your writing influences the reader, the average reader?
That I have absolutely no idea.
Mm-hmm.
And really, when I'm writing, I've become the character.
Mm-hmm.
And more and more, these are all first-person novels. I was very uncomfortable with first-person
mm-hmm.
fiction when I started out. And The Tiger's Daughter, which came out in '72, is a very omnisciently written Forsterian kind of Jane Austenian work. But I'm simply a medium. When the writing is going well, I'm simply a medium for that character. But then as author, I work in all these minor that's where the Mughal miniature aesthetics comes in, that I work in all these other minor characters who, as in the novel Jasmine, are providing either refutations to what the main character thinks or strengthening what the main character thinks.
Can you read us a few lines from Jasmine?
Here's a slightly tough part. This is the cost of becoming an immigrant or coming in illegally. This section is about a young woman, Jasmine, who comes as a widow in order to fulfill a mission that she had promised her late husband, who was killed in a terrorist incident in India. But she's had to, in order to fulfill the mission, she's had to come to the States through a very roundabout, illegal way.
Mm.
And in this section is an encounter between young Jasmine, about 16 years old, and the man who has arranged for her to be brought in illegally. Use a drink? He lay back beside me, one thick arm over me, the other one with the glass. I must use the bathroom, I said, and he let me up. I picked my pants up off the floor and tried to be modest. He balled up my shirt and put it under his head, a second pillow. Get yourself cleaned up, but don't take all night, he shouted. Second time's the sweetest. He seemed to find it amusing. I turned on the shower, making it hot. With water pelting the shower curtain, I vomited. Then I showered. I'd never used a Western shower, standing instead of squatting, with automatic hot water coming hard from a nozzle instead of cool water from a hand-dipped pitcher. It seemed like a miracle that even here, in a place that looked deserted, a place like a madhouse or a prison, where the most hideous crimes took place. The water should be hot. The tiles and porcelain should be clean, without smells, without bugs. It was a place that permitted a kind of purity. I determined to clean my body as it had never been cleaned, with a small rat bar of soap, and to purify my soul with all the prayers I could remember from my father's and my husband's cremations. This would be a fitting place to die. I had left my earthly body, and would soon be joining their souls. The bathroom steamed like a smokehouse. I reached into the pocket of my shalwar for Kingsland's knife. Until the moment that I had held its short, sharp blade to my throat, I hadn't thought of any conclusion but the obvious one: to balance my defilement with my death. I couldn't see myself in the steamed-up mirror, only a dark shadow in the center of the glass. I couldn't see, as I had wanted to, an arm reaching to the neck, the swift slice, the end of my mission. It was the murkiness of the mirror and a sudden sense of mission that stopped me. What if my mission was not yet over? I didn't feel the passionate embrace of Lord Yama that could turn a kerosene flame into a lover's caress. I couldn't let my personal dishonor disrupt my mission. There would be plenty of time to die. I hadn't yet burnt my husband's suit. I had not stood under the palm trees of the college campus. I extended my tongue and nicked it. Hot blood dripped immediately in the sink. And with that, my idea was that she mythologizes herself into Goddess Kali, who is the form of God that we Bengalis worship, and she has a red tongue, as Kali does. And that then empowers her to go and not kill herself, but kill her violator, the man who has raped her and is waiting to rape her again. It was misunderstood by some readers in England as cutting, the self-mutilation.
Wow.
And that's not what it was meant to be, turning oneself into a goddess so that you can then, and that's the first moment of her transformation into a powerful creature rather than a victim.
Yeah, that's the image I got of Kali.
Yeah.
How would you like history to remember you?
Oh, goodness, I try not to think about history. I know when I'm going to die, according to my horoscope, and I'll just wait until the day before to think how I want to be remembered.
Well, thank you very much for your interview, Bharati. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Vidya.